my name is Monique.
And I'm Naveen from Before You Play.
And today we're going to be discussing our top 10 games that were new to us in 2022.
Yeah, so these are games that may have come out this year, but also may have come out in years past, but it's our first time playing them in 2022.
That's right. There are so many games that come out in a year, and a lot of them come out towards the end of the year. So we tried to play as many of those games as possible before making our lists, but it is just impossible to play them all.
Right.
And so before we get into our lists, we do have a couple of things to mention. The first thing is you may have seen the Fire and Ice Awards video that we were both a part of, which featured a lot of fantastic content creators discussing our favorite game of 2022. If you have no idea what we're talking about, this was an awards ceremony hosted by Tim Schwan, a professional videographer. We will leave a link to that video in the description below. Spoiler alert, the board game that we chose was Ark Nova.
Yeah.
And if you want to hear all about why we chose that, please go ahead and follow the link in the description to that video. But for this list, we're going to be basically discussing 10 games that we loved from 2022 that are not Ark Nova.
Yeah, think of it like our top 11 to 2 games.
Sure.
Because Ark Nova was both our number 1. Now, another thing we want to mention is that this video, there won't be too much B-roll. This holiday season has been really tough to get content done. And so it was either do the video with no B-roll or don't do it at all.
Yeah.
So kind of think of it more like a podcast today.
Yeah, I think that's it. Are you ready to begin?
That's it.
Okay, and so of course we're going to start with a couple of honorable mentions, but also stay tuned till the end because we have some superlatives, including some top picks from our Patreon community.
Right.
Would you like to start?
Sure, let's do it.
All right, kick us off, Naveen.
All right, my honorable mention, I do have to disclose that this was a sponsored video that we did, so we did cover it on the channel before, so just a heads up on that. Some of the other games on this list, or our list, will be sponsored, so we will mention those at the time. This one is my runner-up, so it's my 11 on this list, and it's called Beer and Bread.
Okay.
It came out in 2022. It's from Scott Alms, and it's a 2-player only game from Capstone Games. In this game, we are going to be trying to make beer and bread, and you're trying to score both of those categories equally, because at the very end of the game, you're only going to score your lower of the 2 categories. There's a shared pool of resources, and the game is played out kind of in a drafting style of the cards. You're going to try to make bread, you're going to try to make beer,
That's right.
and then you're going to try to kind of basically force your opponent to not have the rights to score their lesser kind of resource or end product as best as possible. So if I know Monique is really doing really well in beer, I'm going to try to avoid or prevent her from getting things that are going to help her build up her bread, because she can only score her lesser of the 2 kind of main end products. So it's a very clever game. You can only hold so many resources, and there's a part of the game where if you overflow in resources, your opponent actually gets to take them. So I thought it was a really, really cool game. It was really neat. And very easy and simple to understand, but also really good strategic depth once you got to play 3 and 4.
Yeah. I actually didn't even think about that bit. That's more strategy. I don't think the point of the game is to deprive your opponent from scoring their other.
It is.
I think that is a good strategy,
Yeah.
though. But I do agree that is one of the better 2-player games to come out this year. And like we were mentioning earlier, that was a game that we were sponsored to do. So full disclosure, but it's the heart of it is in that multi-use cards and drafting, and the fact that it's 2-player only. So it's very head to head. You're trying to foresee what your opponent will be able to do while also planning your future turns. It's very interesting.
Yeah. So that is my runner-up. That is Beer and Bread.
All right, so my honorable mention, this is a game that was designed by Vital Lacerda and published by Eagle Gryphon Games. You probably already know what it is, and it's called Weather Machine. And the reason why this is an honorable mention is because we didn't actually play this year. We were fortunate to be able to preview the early prototype before it went onto Kickstarter last year.
Right.
We actually made a playthrough for it, so if you're interested in checking that out, it is a video on our channel. But that is a game that, had it come out this year, it definitely would have made this list.
Right.
So I did not want to go without mentioning it. If you've never heard of Weather Machine before, in that game, you are playing as a scientist, and you're trying to create a new prototype for a weather machine, because the old prototype was awful.
It was causing problems.
Causing problems.
Lots of them.
And if you know any of Vital Lacerda's games, it is very much so in that same style of strategy and thinking where everything is circular, but even more so, I think, in that game, because you literally go around and around trying to get one thing to go for another, and it is very kind of circular game, right?
Yeah. There's basically 3 different spots on the board where you need one element to work towards the next, and everything kind of is, like most Vital Lacerda games, is all cohesive, where you cannot just omit or kind of forget about one element of the game. You have to really focus on everything.
Yeah.
So it kind of has your brain just constantly turning and just trying to think about, what is the most ideal thing in my particular situation. I personally liked it better at 3 players over 2 players. And I think I
Definitely.
mentioned that in our review back when we filmed that video.
Yeah.
Because there's some elements of people working together, not so much semi co-op, but it's like, hey, the 2 of us, we can work on this one thing, and we can exclude that 3rd player. Maybe we can score and then leave them behind.
Wow.
In a 2-player game, there's not really much of that going on. It's like, well, I'm going for this. It's like, well, I'm not going to help you. So
I just have to say that after we did make that video last year, a lot of people, I think, kind of heard our review of it and thought this is a bad 2-player game. That's not true at all.
No.
It is fine at 2. It just, I agree, is a little bit better at 3. But it's also extremely beautiful. Just, Tool always knocks it out of the park. And this one in particular was a gorgeous, gorgeous looking board and design. So anyway, that is my honorable mention. It is Weather Machine.
All right, now moving on to the list. This is my number 10 game. This is designed by 2 different designers, Jamie Sajdak as well as Manois Vrenas. I apologize if I mispronounced your names. This is another 2-player only game on my list, published by Smirk and Laughter Games. Came out in 2019, and it is called Shobu. Shobu is an abstract strategy game in which one player is going to be playing as the black player and the other one as the white player. Very simple components. There are 4 wooden boards that are in a 4x4 configuration each. A piece of rope separating the 2 boards, 2 boards from the other 2 boards. Essentially, what you're going to be doing on your turn is you're going to be moving 1 stone on one of the boards 1 to 2 spaces, either orthogonal or diagonal. What happens then, there's a ripple effect or almost like a portal effect where that first move was a passive move and your second move is an aggressive move where it basically mirrors what you just did on that first board on a different board. The ultimate goal of the game is to try to knock off your opponent's stones all on one board. So in the first action that you take, the passive move, when you move those stones, if you press up against an opponent's stone, you're not allowed to move it. But in the aggressive stage, when you go into that kind of portal movement, if you do press up against them, you can knock them off. So there's kind of this element of what I do here is going to affect something downstream, but that's going to now put me in a position where I have some weakness because the opponent's now going to take their turn. So how do I strategically move myself into an aggressive position, but also protect myself from my opponent's aggressive position? It's a fantastic game. Very, very simple components. And it seems like a game that would have came out centuries ago.
Oh, yeah.
Only came out in 2019.
Like a design that's like passed down from generation to generation, right? It's stones, like wooden boards and rope. It's very, very simple, but very deep. And I actually really like that game as well. That's probably one of my favorite abstract strategy games.
Totally.
I debated putting it on my list, but I tried to make my list as 2022 as possible.
Fair.
So I didn't. But that is an excellent game.
Thanks. So that was my number 10. That is Shobu.
All right. So moving on to my number 10. The reason why this game is on my list, first of all, is because I've only been able to play it once. Had I been able to play it more times, then I feel like this could potentially be higher.
Yeah, okay.
But this game is designed by S.J. McDonald and Shem Phillips, and it's published by Garphill Games, and it is called Wayfarers of the South Tigris.
Yep.
So we did a West Kingdom trilogy. If you're familiar with that series, they actually have a few series.
Yeah,
now,
they had the
right?
North, they did the West, which is one you're talking about, and now they're starting the new one, which is the South, and I think this is also going to be a trilogy.
Okay, so we did a full series where we played all of the games in the West Kingdom, and we loved it for various reasons. We have our own hierarchy and all that stuff, and that's on our channel if you'd like to check that out. But when this game came out, we were told that if you enjoyed the heavier games in that series, then you'll probably like this one.
Right.
And so if you've never played this game before, in this game, you're basically explorers who are trying to chronicle your journeys by literally journaling. There's a journal track on the board, but you're also going to be exploring the lands, the seas, and space, and you're going to be building out your player board in a way to demonstrate this, I guess.
Yeah, like you create this panorama at the bottom, which is going to open up different actions that you can try to take. You try to soup up those actions by having different traders or different people who work there to make those actions stronger. So yeah, this is a good game. We do need to play it more often. For sure.
Only played it once, but the one time that we played it, I thought it was quite difficult. It's harder than Paladins, which I thought was the most difficult one in the West Kingdom trilogy.
Yeah, definitely after the rules teach, it was like, ooh, okay, now it's first turn. It's like, ooh,
Yeah, it's
so
so
many pathways.
it's
Yeah.
tight. I feel like it might be a little bit punishing, and it's also kind of like forces you to go down a certain direction because there's no real way to flush the market. A lot of the actions that you take are going to require a certain economy, which is also difficult to build because you need the provisions and the coins, just like in the other games in the other series.
Right.
But this one in particular has a very tight feeling to it. And I think it's because of both the action selection economy with the workers. You have dice that you're placing as well as workers that become shared workers when
Right.
you place them out onto the board to take actions. The dice are interesting because you also have this caravan area on your player board that you can kind of customize in terms of the way the different dice values behave. So some actions require you to have certain symbols, and this is a very symbol heavy game. You're basically bouncing off the different symbols and you're scoring for them at the end of the game. I know this all sounds very cryptic, but it's a very strange game.
It's a pure Euro for
Yeah.
sure, through and through. You are basically trying to figure out how to make every die roll as beneficial and as lucrative as possible. At the very beginning of the game, your caravan is going to be pretty much naked,
Yeah.
pretty much empty. So you're like, this 4 doesn't really do anything for me right
Yet.
now. Yet, but in the future, if you can make things happen where your 3 can actually act as a 4, which then gets you this bonus, that bonus, and then therefore now this 4 is really, really valuable when you take your
Right.
actions. That part of the game is really fun. Try to
Yeah,
craft your
it's
die
really
pool and
cool.
try to make it better. Also, try to manage those shared workers and try to time exactly when you're going to put them out to get the most bang for your buck. Yeah, it's a really, really interesting game, and I do
Yeah.
want to play it again.
And the thing that kind of makes it tough as well is there are only certain ways that everybody will score, definitely. But then there are also other kind of endgame scoring cards that you collect along the way. And then you have to try to play to those endgame scoring
Right,
cards, which
right.
is all very difficult. And at the end of the day, it's also kind of a race because the journal track is what's going to dictate when the game ends. So I liked it. On first play, I thought it was very, very interesting. I don't know how I would feel playing it at 4 players because at 2, I thought it's
Yeah.
pretty tough.
Maybe 3 again. 3
Yeah,
is like the
2 or
common
3
number that
maybe.
we like to play with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll see. That is why it is number 10 and not higher because, again, it's just the first play. And that is Wayfarers of the South Tigris.
Okay, my number 9 game. This is also another one that we've only played once, but really enjoyed our time when we did play it. This is designed by David, Nathan, and Jeff Cornelius, and it's a 1 to 6 player game published by Gray Fox Games. This came out in 2022, at least the deluxe edition of it. This is called Campaign Trail. This game is essentially a U.S. election simulation. It's an area control game in the end, but the way we played it was a 6-player game where everybody is going to be in teams of 2. So you have 3 different political parties that are all vying to become the president and vice president of the United States. Essentially, what you're going to be doing is trying to manipulate the United States map by placing out voters into different states that support you. And it's ultimately area control. The board is divided up into all 50 states by the Electoral College, if you're familiar with the Electoral College. And essentially what you're trying to do is have the majority by the end of the game. Players have a president and a vice president, each with their own pro and con. They have different home states that they kind of have a leg up in compared to the other opponents. There's 6 different actions in the game, and each card will have only 4 of those actions. So there's kind of this hand management and kind of this okay, we don't want to overextend ourselves in California because we're already pretty good there, but we do need to shore it up a little bit. But this is my only card to kind of protect us against somebody overtaking California. So now I can't play this card right now. So there's a lot of this like talking with your teammate, which was really, really fun. When we went to game night, Monique and I were the only 2 people there, or 3 of us there that had not played it. And when the mention of Campaign Trail was like, hey, anybody want to play that? Everybody that had played it was like, oh, let's play that right now.
Yeah.
So when we saw like everybody's kind of fervor for that selection, we were like, okay, cool, like let's play it.
Can't say no now.
Yeah, can't say no now. Like, how are you going to be like, no, let's not play that?
Yeah.
So we got to play it. We split up in our pairs. And what was nice was each one of us split up with somebody who had played the game before. So they were kind of like, okay, be careful of this. Don't overextend yourself here. Don't do this. Don't do that. We'll work together.
Yeah.
And so it was a fantastic time. This game really came down to the very end and some decisions. My team, we overextended ourselves just a little bit, but we kind of felt like we had to. And Monique's team did really well. They came in and cleaned up because they basically were able to manipulate turn order so that they can see what everybody else did, and then came in and kind of
Yeah.
bamboozled us all. But
Yeah,
it's a really fun game.
The team who has the last action, the last say, is, in standard area control fashion, the last people to manipulate the board usually has some sort of a leg up. And so that's kind of what happened with us.
Yeah.
But same with me. I typically run away screaming when it comes to any kind of politically themed game, especially the U.S. elections.
And area control.
And area control, exactly. Yeah. But this one, it really just came down to the team dynamic as well as the hand management. Those are the two things that really was the heart and soul of the game.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, during those debates, it's all about symbols, what symbols you had.
Yep.
And so you had to really purposefully leave cards in your hand for that point.
Yeah, because before going into a debate, the debate will happen at a certain period of time. You know what topics are going to be discussed. So
Yes,
you need
which
to
symbols.
withhold, symbols, which are topics are going to be discussed or debated over.
Yeah.
You know ahead of time. So there's cards in your hand that you're like, in mid-game before debate, I want to hold on to this card because I know it's going to be useful during the debate. But you see people manipulating the board, and you're like, hey, teammate, okay, I have this card for the debate, but I'm a little nervous about what's happening on the board. I don't think it's going to be as strong. Maybe I should use it now.
Yeah.
And it's really, really interesting. So if you like tug of war area control games, this might be one to check out. My number 9, Campaign Trail.
All right, so moving on to my number 9. This is a game that came out this year, actually fairly recently. And we also recently covered it on our channel. This is a game designed by Scott Brady and published also by Smirk and Laughter Games, another 2-player only abstract, and it is called Boop. So Boop is the cutest game to come out this year that we've played, I think,
yeah,
right?
probably.
In this game, you are basically trying to put kittens on a quilt, and you're just trying to score a 3 in a row. But the thing is, every time you put a kitten adjacent to any other kittens around the board, including your own, all those kittens get pushed away in the opposite direction. And so that makes it real hard for you to line up your kittens in a 3 in a row if every time you do that, things get pushed away.
Yep.
So that is the entire game, basically. It pretty much taught you how to play it.
Yeah.
After you line up 3 kittens in a row, then those kittens graduate into cats. And the real object of the game is to line up 3 cats in a row. So it is fantastic. It is very, very simple. It is extremely cute. And you can play it with all ages, essentially, because there's also an easier mode for younger children. And it is such a great abstract strategy game.
Very tactical.
It's very tactical. It feels almost chess-like because it is really hard to get your kittens in a row if they're all moving around. So you really almost kind of have to wrangle your way in. There are a couple of formations that you want to try to put your pieces into that'll help you get into that diagonal or vertical horizontal 3 in a row. But your opponent is also sort of looking out for those formations. So it does become chess-like because, I feel like if I were to put this here, it'll cause this reaction. My opponent will probably react like this, which will let me do this. So it kind of benefits you to see a few turns into the future.
Yeah,
right?
definitely. You have to see kind of the consequences of okay, I'm placing this down. It's going to move this cat here, here, and here. What does that now set up for you when it goes into your turn? In all of our plays, it's almost like one of us gets worn down, namely me. that
First time.
Not the first time. That's the only time I ever beat you at it. But essentially, you have to kind of see what are the consequences of when you boop these kittens and cats. What is that new setup going to be like? What we didn't mention in the explanation just now was anytime there are 2 kittens or 2 cats or any combination of 2 pieces next to each other, that cat or kitten will not get booped anymore. It's almost like a hard stop. So you want to kind of position yourself into these situations where you're walled off, and then it's kind of like, well, I'm going to either score here or here. So tough luck.
Or if you can wall yourself by doing the pairing, but you can still separate that pairing by doing a diagonal boop. So it's not like a forever wall.
No, but you're trying to set yourself up where it's like now you're going to take an inefficient turn to try to break this up, and I still have other options. So
and that's
really
the thing that I really like about this game. That is common in abstracts. The more you play it, the deeper it gets. And that's what's interesting about this is because it's so simple. You think how much deeper can it get, right? But the strategy does get deeper in the way that you exchange your kittens out. You can have a line of 2 kittens and a cat, and that would only graduate the kittens. So it's kind of is it worth it for me to sacrifice this cat in that move just to get more cats?
To get them off the board, yeah.
Maybe I want to switch out all my kittens into cats, or maybe I want to reserve some kittens because kittens cannot boop cats.
Yes.
So just that in that rule alone, it already adds a lot of depth.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, this game could be benefiting from recency bias because we did cover it fairly recently and we played it a bunch preparing for that.
That's good.
But I am a big fan of abstract strategy games. I love Shobu. I really, really love this one especially because it is so clean, easy to get into. It's a small box. The first time we played it was on the surface of our bed, actually, because I wasn't really feeling well that day. And it was just like one game that was so easy to get into no matter where you are. And that was my number 9, Boop.
Nice. Okay, so my number 8 game from this year, this one did come out this year in 2022. It is designed by Prospero Hall and published by Funko Games. This one is called Rear Window. Now, Rear Window, I have trouble describing this game, so maybe Monique will help me.
What? On the spot?
On this one. Yeah.
Okay, so Rear Window is a board game based off of the Alfred Hitchcock movie.
Movie,
Called
yes.
Rear Window, which we still haven't seen.
Still haven't seen it.
And basically, it is a Mysterium-like game, if you've played that game before, where basically one person is playing as the director who is looking out their window
Who's looking out at the
thematically.
other apartments.
And that person, when looking out their window, can see the other apartments across the way and potentially witness the murder. And so the game board is divided into these 4 windows, and you're basically trying to figure out who is in each window and what their characteristics are.
Right.
And all that information is determined during setup by the director. And so the game is played over the course of 4 days, and each day the director is going to be putting out these cards that are they're not abstract actually. They have
kind of.
They have the characters drawn on them, as well as different
Elements,
items
yeah.
that might lead you in the direction of their traits. Like if somebody is a photographer, there may be a camera or something.
Or a poster on the wall. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, they took a picture of that. Maybe that's what they're trying to tell me.
Right. But the director only has a hand of 8 cards, and you must play them all out.
Right.
So sometimes you might not have cards that fit what information you're trying to provide the rest of the group.
That's right.
And so, it's interesting. There's a lot of deduction. There's a huge deduction component to it because the director's going to put out all of their cards, and then the rest of the team, because this is a one versus many game, is going to try to decide, which labels go on which windows. Do you have this character? Do you have this trait? And then at the end of that day or round, the director is going to tell the rest of the team how many of those 8 aspects they got 100% correct.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, so there's like a big discussion element of the game. Like after you place out your cards as the director, you know all the answers. So you're trying to get everybody else on the other side of your screen to kind of think on your same wavelength.
Yeah.
So you might put out like a police officer who's in like a blue room, and then people think like, oh, definitely the police officer's here, and you're like, oh no, I was really going for the blue. The blue was kind of a big element
the
that I
guy
need you, or the guy, or it was actually the piano. I really needed you to see the piano. So when at the end of the day or the first round, that's when basically the group is going to look at the director and say, okay, how many are correct? And you're going to say 4. You don't know which 4 elements.
You don't know which 4.
So now you go into the next day, you have a new head of cards, you're like, okay, as the director, okay, well, they thought police officer there, so I need to now really throw them off. I cannot allow a police officer to go into that same window that they're
not a police officer.
Yeah, that they're 100% sure about, so that I can start creating doubt. Because the worst thing in these games is when group mentality is like, that is 100% the police officer. We're going to stick with it for all 4 days because you have to throw them off. So now you have to figure out, oh, this card would be so perfect for another thing, but I really need to get them off of this. So I'm going to waste this card by getting them off that element. So it's really fun.
By day 3 or 4, you have all this information. You kind of can see, okay, I got 3 things correct on the first day, but I got 6 things right on the second day and only 4 things right. So what did I actually get right?
Yeah.
And, we've played a game of it where Naveen was not doing well at all. I think you were getting like 3, 3, 3, 3. And then the final day, he solved the entire thing.
There was a lot of reasoning. Going through. So Monique was a director in that one, and it was only the game says it plays 3 and up. You can totally play this 2-player.
You can play it 2-player.
So we played it this one that she's talking about 2-player, and I was just struggling, and eventually after the 4th day, Monique put out the right combination of cards or something to be like, okay, so I was wrong here, but I was kind of right about that there. So then I was just able to piece things. Connecting the dots, and I was able to get the full 8. Because ultimately, what you're trying to do as the director, the person behind the screen, you're trying to get your opponents to guess all 8 correct.
Yeah.
There's also this element of like kind of like this hidden murder.
Yeah,
that
I was
we
gonna
won't
say,
go into.
unless there's a murder, and that's kind of the wonky part of the game.
Yeah.
If there's a murder, then now it becomes a semi-cooperative game where the director doesn't want you to fully guess it all.
Yeah, the director wants you to guess like 7 of the 8 elements.
Yeah,
correct.
something
They want you
like
to get
that.
close, but not close enough. Yeah.
And if you want an even harder game, there are more difficult purple traits that require you to have a second character. It's a good game.
It's a good game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I just really like watching the discussions. I really like being the director. I like being on that
okay.
side of it, but I'll gladly play on the opposite side of it. But it's nice to just be kind of like this puppet master, like, okay, I'm gonna put this out, and then you find yourself with these cards, and you're like, man, 4 of these 8 cards are terrible. Like, I have
Yeah.
no idea where I'm gonna put these.
Right.
So yeah, it's my number 8 from this year. It came out in 2022. That is Rear Window.
All right, moving on to my number 8. My number 8 is a roll and write game. So I love abstract strategy games, but I also do love roll and writes. And this game was designed by Matthew Dunstan and published by Blue Orange Games this year. It's a 2022 release, and it's called Next Station London.
Nice.
So in this game, you are building out 4 railway lines of the Tube in London, which is London's underground railway system. And each line that you draw on your board is a different color. So everybody's going to be working on their 4 different lines, but you're kind of offset. So if I'm working on the blue line, Naveen might be working on the purple line, somebody else is working on green, and there are 4 colored pencils that rotate to kind of help you signify that.
Gotcha.
The game is played over the course of 4 rounds because you're working on 1 line per round.
Okay.
And the way that a round works is there's a deck of cards that you flip over, and that is the station that you have to connect to.
Okay.
And whenever you connect to those stations, you're only connecting from one of the 2 terminal ends of the line.
Okay.
And you have to draw along the pre-constructed kind of like dashed lines that are already on the paper. So you can't just draw anywhere.
Okay.
There are predetermined lines for that. And there are a few other rules, like you can't cross through a line. It has to go from station to
Makes
station.
sense.
And that's really, really important because you can kind of block yourself off that way.
I see.
Your paper is also consistent of 9 different main grids as well as 4 corner grids. And that's important because at the end of the round, the way that you score points for your line is going to be the most number of stations that you're able to connect in one of those grids multiplied by the number of grids you're able to reach.
Okay. I see.
So
Oh, okay.
most number in 1 square times how many squares did you hit?
Gotcha. Yeah, this is one that I have not played, so
Yes,
this is
that's
all
right.
kind of a new description to me. She hasn't even described this to me, so this is the
Yes.
moment I'm learning about this
If
game
you've
also.
never played this game,
Yeah.
I have a lot more time for content creation,
Yeah.
so that's why a lot of my list is 2022 releases, unlike Naveen's.
Yep.
But this is a really fun one, Naveen.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds
So it's really hard. It's really hard to focus on both trying to get a lot of stations in 1 square and reach as many squares as possible because you can't double back. You cannot cross through a line.
Okay.
You can only connect from station to station.
Gotcha.
So it is possible for you to totally block yourself out, which I've done a number of times. I play this game a bunch because it's actually available on Board Game Arena.
Okay.
And it plays really well on Board Game Arena just because of the way that the automatic system works on there, and it becomes actually really addicting.
Interesting,
So in addition to those scoring conditions, you also have the Thames River flowing across the middle of the board.
Okay.
And so you gain additional points every time you cross that river.
Oh, okay.
So
it kind of incentivizes you, like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe I do want to sneak up there, but you don't know what the
Yes.
cards are gonna.
right.
Okay, I
And
see.
it also kind of makes it difficult for you because you can really block yourself off by focusing too much on that too.
Gotcha. Okay.
There are also, I think, tourist stations that incentivize you to try to visit them as much as possible because they'll score you additional points. And at the end of the game, you'll score additional points for each station that you're able to hit with multiple lines.
I see.
Which is
Okay.
really hard to do
Okay.
because of the whole blocking thing.
So you're trying to like cross the river. You're trying to get to
Yes.
the tourists. You're trying to centralize in one like
Yeah.
hub.
Yes.
Okay, but you can't do it all. It's one of those things.
You can try, and I'm sure there are people out there who are really, really good at it. You know, if you really have that kind of a brain, that kind of spatial brain, you can do it all, I think. And if that's not hard enough, you can also have public objectives that you're trying to reach before the end of the game as well.
So is it like twists and turns? Like every time a card flips, you're like, oh, okay, that changes things.
Yes, because each station is only connected to certain shapes. Sorry, I should have mentioned that each station is represented by a shape, like triangle, circle, square.
Okay.
And each station only connects to certain stations. And
Gotcha.
so if you are only, your terminal ends are only legally able to connect to squares and you draw a circle card, then you have to pass.
Then you have to-
can't
I
even play
see.
anything.
So you have to keep your options open.
You have
at
to keep
all
your
times.
options open. Yeah, there's a
Gotcha.
lot of
Ooh,
strategy.
that
It's
sounds good.
actually
That sounds
quite
very good. Yeah.
a deep roll and write game, and it's climbing up there for one of my favorite roll and write games of all time. I think.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very, very impressed. And also it's designed by Matthew Dunstan, who I'm really learning that I really enjoy his designs.
love his
Him
designs,
with
yeah.
Brett Gilbert. They've been releasing a lot more games over the years, and I have a couple of them on my list.
Nice.
So anyway,
Very
that
cool.
is my number 8. That is Next Station London.
Okay, so before filming this, we did consult with our lists. My number 7 is going to appear later on
Yes.
Monique's list, so we'll talk about it then.
Which is funny because my number 7 also appears a little bit higher up on Naveen's
Mine.
list. So we're gonna pass 7 completely.
Pass on
But we'll
7.
refer to it again later.
So now we are moving on to my number 6 of all time from 2022.
Of all time.
Of all time from 2022, which
Yes.
actually came out in 2016.
Yeah.
I played this at Dice Tower West. It's a game designed by Stefan Feld. It is published by TMG, so this game is probably pretty hard to get. I know it took me a very long time to actually get it.
Yeah, I think it's out of print.
It's
just
out of
so
print.
you know.
Yeah. So this game is called The Oracle of Delphi. Shout out to Alex over at Board Game Co. He knows that I like this game, and it randomly appeared at our doorstep one day. So thank you so much,
Yeah,
Alex. I was
very
really
nice.
looking for this game for a very long time. Thank you. So The Oracle of Delphi, designed by Stefan Feld, is essentially a kind of order fulfillment game where
It's
you
like a scavenger hunt.
like a scavenger
Right.
hunt, yeah. So Zeus has tasked you to go and complete these different tasks. I believe there's 12 tasks in the full game, and you can play with less if you want a shorter game. And essentially, everybody has the exact same task. Something might be destroy a red monster. Some things could be deliver something to a particular temple. And you're essentially going around with your boat by using your dice, because you have a dice pool. You roll your dice at the beginning of your turn, and these are the different types of actions you can take. And you're trying to just navigate your way around these different islands and try to be the most efficient navigator to try to complete all your different tasks. I love every single element of this game. The one part of it is the fighting of the monsters that can be a little bit challenging.
I forgot how that worked actually. The flipping of the is it
So
flipping
no,
of the
you,
card?
you roll a die, and you're supposed to have enough attack strength against that die roll. So if
Yes.
you roll really high and really bad, then that means the monster is gonna like kind of wallop you. So that means you have to go into that task really prepared ahead of
Okay.
time. There's also kind of like these wounds that you take that can kind of stifle you. So you're constantly trying to kind of push your luck almost when you're taking wounds.
Yeah.
And then there's also passive benefits that you can get on your opponent's turn. So anytime your opponent rolls their dice for their dice pool, you have the ability to potentially move up these different gods on this track, as long as those gods have gotten off the starting block. Sorry, it's kind of hard to explain without the game in front of me, but essentially once you get these gods to the end of their track, then you can do something special with them.
Okay.
And they all have their own kind of unique way that they operate. So you're kind of invested in other people's turns when they kind of roll their dice. Sometimes games like this could be like, head down, I'm going to finish this. Oh no, you only have 2 left. Like, no, you're constantly looking around. So if I see Monique is close to that green temple, I also have to do the green temple. So if I go there and I deliver it first, then that's good, because then that means I'm
That's
moving on.
rude.
Let's
Then-
move on. Or, there's resources at that place. And
Yeah.
I know that Daniel needs those resources.
Right.
So this is the good opportunity to go get those resources, because he's wasting all these actions trying to get to it, and I know what he's up to.
You hear how he thinks?
Yeah. Well, no, this happened to me. I was the
Yeah,
person
it
that was
did.
like, oh, no, wait.
Everything's gone.
Yeah. So once I saw that, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. So
Yeah,
we've
yeah.
played it a couple times, and really, really enjoy it. It's really, really fun.
Yeah.
And it's a keeper for me.
Yeah, I really like that game as well. Not a fan of the fact that it's out of print, so unfortunately apologize about that. But it is really fun. There is an aspect to it that I found quite punishing, and I thought that's what you were talking about, where one of your I don't exactly remember how it works, but it is kind of like a push your luck thing.
It's the wounds that you
Yeah.
draw.
The wounds that you
Yeah.
draw.
So if
Yeah,
you hit 6 wounds, you essentially discard down to, I think, half of them down to 3, and then you skip your turn.
Yeah,
So
for
you
quite a
have to-
strategic game.
Yeah.
That was killer.
Well, there's a way to offset this. So at the beginning of every player's turn, I believe they roll this black die, and if your shields are not high enough, then you are susceptible to getting injured by drawing from this deck. So if you focus on getting your shields up to protect you from these bad die rolls, then maybe you're not going to take as many wounds. But if you're
You can
doing
prepare.
that, then you're not doing
doing
all the
something else.
tasks that
Yeah.
you're trying to go and do. So
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a good like balance between the different things you're trying to accomplish and
Mhm.
also be competitive against your opponents.
And at the end of the day, it's a race.
Yeah.
So that is the true heart and soul of Oracle of Delphi. It's kind of pick up and deliver, and it's a race game.
Yeah.
It almost feels like a mix between Castles of Burgundy with the die rolling and dice action selection, as well as Bonfire. If you played Bonfire,
Yes.
because of the way that you have to go around to the different islands.
Yeah, it's a good.
And pick up and deliver.
Yeah, that's
right?
a good way to kind of hybridize the two of them.
Yeah.
So that is my number 6, a game that came out back in 2016, The Oracle of Delphi.
All right, moving on to my number 6, which is so funny that I was just talking about how that's out of print. This is a game that's also potentially, we hear, might be going out of print.
Okay.
Not 100% yet, but might be going out of print soon. And it is a game that was published in 2020 by Cosmos and designed by Marcello Bertocci. And it's a 2-player only abstract strategy game called Aqualin. So this is another game that we actually have a playthrough of on our channel. So if you're interested in checking that out, it's there. But basically in this game, you're basically just placing out these aquamarine tiles that they have like
There's different species and different colors
yes,
on them, right?
that's
Yeah.
right. They're different colors and they're different marine animals like seahorse, octopus.
I want to say like jellyfish, also.
Jellyfish?
Yeah, it's like
Not
escaping me for some
remembering
reason.
the actual animals that are on there.
Yeah.
But one player plays as the colors, and the other one plays as the actual animals.
species, yeah.
And you're just trying to group your whatever you are. If you're colors, you're trying to group specific colors together, and if you're animals, you're grouping the animals together. Because at the end of the game, the larger the group is, the more points it's going to score. But it's not that simple because it's very tactical. On your turn, before placing out a new tile, you get to move another tile by sliding it over.
Yep.
And that obviously is going to break up groups that your opponent is trying to make, or potentially both
Create
breaking
ones.
up and creating groups for you
Yeah.
before you now place a new tile onto the board. So you can do things like sliding over a tile that you need and then blocking it in with a new tile
To secure
to
it.
secure it.
Yeah.
Although nothing is ever fully secure until you get into like the last third of the game
Right.
where space becomes limited. But the first time I read the rules to this, I thought, wow, this is a very simple game. Like simple like Boop, but maybe even more simple.
Yeah, just slide, put.
Slide in place.
Put.
And
Yeah.
it's either colors or it's sea creatures. But really, when you get into it, it becomes very tactical and painful because you're just constantly having all of your plans ruined.
Yeah.
And no, it's fantastic.
It
I
is
thought it
good.
was really good. It's
Yeah.
very fast and you're in it all the way. You know, you're both like it's very intense.
It's
right?
another one of those abstracts where I really like this one where it's like you're just looking and you're like, okay, so that one gets Monique 4 and this one
Yeah.
over here gets 3, but she can really build off of this 3. So I kind
Right.
of want to break that up because
Yeah.
that 4 is it. She cannot add to this anymore
Mm-hmm.
based off the way the kind of the tiles are. But that 3, that can grow. So I need that to not be a thing. I
Yeah.
need to clear that out. Oh, and I'll actually use that color to my advantage over here. And so there's a lot of like those little micro decisions that all of
Yeah.
a sudden you're at the 2/3 mark of the game and you're like, oh, terrible. Like,
Just
what did I
sacrifice
do?
that part,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And because as the board gets locked up, you can only slide a tile until it hits another tile or gets to the edge of the board. So
Right.
as the kind of like the holes start to fill in, it gets really tight and really just like
Yeah.
tough.
'Cause
Like,
you can only slide in one direction.
Yeah.
And so if Naveen puts a tile that I really need on like the other corner of the board, I'm thinking, okay, do I have enough time to get it from here
Slide
to
down,
this
slide
corner?
up, yeah.
Yeah, slide up, try to get it over here before Naveen blocks it. So
Exactly,
it's
yeah.
really good. It's really good. It's really fast. And I really hope it doesn't go out of print forever. If you can find it, that is my number 6. It is called Aqualin.
all right, now we are going to go to my number 5, which is what we skipped over on Monique's number 7.
Yes.
So we do have a crossover here, and now we are going to go ahead and talk about it. This game actually came out in 2017. It's designed by Kevin Bishop, and it's a 2 to 5 player cooperative game from Meramorph Games. It is called The Shipwreck Arcana. We also covered this on the channel, and
Yes.
this is was this the first time we had a 3-player playthrough on the channel?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I think so. With Michael.
One of our friends, Michael, who helps
Yeah.
us play a lot of games, he came and played with us because we felt the game was much more dynamic at a
Yes.
higher player count.
Right.
So if you wanted to check that out, there will be links also to that playthrough of it. And we first were exposed to this game when we went on to Aircon in England earlier this year.
Yes.
One of the lovely members that came and joined us for that trip taught it to us.
Yeah, thank you, Anne.
Thanks, Anne. Yeah, it is a fantastic game. It's basically a cooperative math game. where you are trying to.
It's a deduction game.
It's a deduction math
A lot
game.
of people don't like math, but
Sure.
it's more a deduction game. Right?
A lot of the deduction is based off of mathematics because there's going to be these cards that are laid out that have specific rules. On your turn, you're going to have these different tiles that have varying numbers on them. And these numbers basically, you're trying to convey to your opponents or to your teammates what these numbers are on these tiles that I have. So I have to use some of the tokens to convey information on my turn. So something might say only even numbers can be placed here. So then I would take my tile and I'd place an even number out there. It's a little hard to describe right now.
So I think that the tile numbers are 1 through
7.
7.
Yes, 1 through 7.
And you have 2 tiles you're in possession of. You're going to use 1 tile to give a hint to everybody else because this is a fully cooperative
That's
game,
right.
so we're working together. And you're trying to give them a hint as to what the other tile in your hand is. You want them to guess what the other tile is. And the way that you do that is there are these like really neat artistic
The art is
cards
really nice on them,
that
yeah.
are on the table that have these rules, such as like Naveen said,
Even
play,
number only.
play a tile here if it's an even number, or play a tile if it's less than 5. I don't actually remember what the specific cards say.
There's a lot of different rules.
But if I play my even number tile on that card, then maybe I'm telling the whole group that, hey, this tile is not even numbered.
Right.
It can only be 1, 3, 5, or 7 or something like that, right?
So everybody as a team is going to say, okay, do we all agree that like we should flip over these counter tokens? So it's like Monique's tile is an odd number, so it's probably a 1, 3, 5, or a 7. We can just say forget about 2, 4, and 6.
And the thing is, each card can only hold a certain number of tiles, and once you've met that card's limit, it gets faded.
A negative thing happens.
Yeah, something bad happens,
Yeah.
and this can escalate quickly, causing the entire group to lose. So you're trying to juggle how many tiles can I put out on these different cards? Which card do I put my tile on to give the most information possible, so that you can try to make as many guesses as you need to in order to win the game.
Yeah, and a big thing about this game is, so let's just say in our example, we know that Monique has an odd number. So at the end of her turn, she's going to draw back up to have 2 tiles. If, let's say, that tile that we were first trying to guess is a 5, she's going to really want to hold on to that and use the newly acquired tile to place out the next time
clues.
for her clues, because if she starts mixing things up, then the information we have from the first time she gave clues is completely null and void.
Unless it still applies.
Unless it still applies. And so
Yeah.
that's where like a lot of the fun of the game comes from. Like you're trying to deduce and try to survive basically the whole time.
Yeah.
I just thought it was really, really fun, really clever.
Yeah.
Easy to
a great
teach
game.
when it's in front of you, kind of hard just from words, just
To
kind of
describe.
to describe it.
Yeah, that's a really neat one, and it's so small and easy to bring as like a travel game. That is the initial setting that we learned the game in. It was actually on a bus,
On a bus.
so
yeah.
you can really bring that game anywhere, and people can come in and out of it. So you don't have to, play the entire game with just the same people. That's what's so great about it.
So yeah, that is my number 5 and Monique's number 7, the Shipwreck Arcana.
All right, moving on to my number 5. This is the game that I believe we had a crossover earlier. What number was it for you?
It was 7 also. So
oh,
yeah.
there you go.
We skipped our 7s, yeah.
Yes, this is a dice chucker, which is interesting because we don't normally play a whole lot of dice games.
Yeah.
And I also have to give a disclosure. This is a game that we were sponsored to do, I think, 2 playthroughs of in the past. But sometimes that is how we get introduced to these games
totally.
by the sponsorships. But just so you know. And this game is designed by Gavin Brown, Nate Chatelier, and Manny Tremblay. It's published by The Op and Roxley. And it is called Marvel Dice Throne.
Yes.
So this is the Marvel version of, I think it's just called
Dice
Dice
Throne,
Throne,
yeah.
right? They have, I think, 2 seasons of that. And in this game, you're basically just doing a head-to-head dueling battle with a character. This one in particular has characters from the Marvel universe, and you're basically just trying to activate your abilities to knock them out. They have a health dial, and you're trying to get their health dial down to 0.
Yeah, each player has like 5 dice. You roll the dice. You have up to 3 times to roll different sets.
Yeah.
And you're trying to place these dice into different kind of abilities that you can do to either soup up different things. You're trying to basically knock it, like Monique said, your opponent's health from 40 down to 0. Whoever's first to do it is the winner. The fun element for me is kind of like that Yahtzee style where you're rolling and you're like, all right, so I have a 1 in 6 shot of rolling this, but I have 2 rolls, so I'm willing to do this. okay, maybe I'll roll this a little bit. Okay, I didn't get it. Okay, let's try to zag. I'm not willing to take that chance. And then
Yeah.
you roll into something even better. It's fun. Just like I like the fact that you're always kind of on your toes. It plays
Yeah.
really well at 2 players.
Yes.
Um,
I mean, that's exactly it. It's a
yeah.
Yahtzee style dice chucking game. If you've never played Yahtzee before, I played Yahtzee for the first time like a couple of years ago, and it is a
great.
really good roll and
Yeah,
write
it's
game.
good.
And there are a lot of games that are based off of that sort of dice rolling and strategy. And this is one. This is one of them.
Yep.
And it's really neat because you also have a hand of cards that can help you manipulate your dice or your opponent's dice, which is interesting.
Yeah, so if I see Monique got something really good, and I
Yeah.
have a card that says force an opponent to re-roll, I'm like, you're gonna re-roll that right
Yes.
now. Yeah. Yeah.
So there is that element of take that, which I don't typically enjoy in games, but this one, it makes sense
Yeah.
because it's just a dueling racing to try to eliminate your opponent. And the thing that's really fun for me is trying to activate your like super ability. Everybody has this ultimate ability that can only be activated if you have all 6 of the really hard to roll value.
All 6 of the 1 in 6 shot.
Or 5? I don't
one
remember
in-
how many dice there are now.
There's 5 dice. Yeah.
Okay, but on each
Or
die,
all 5 of the 1 in 6
because
shot. Yeah.
everybody has their own special dice depending on which character you are, and each character has a 1 in 6 shot to roll 1 symbol.
Yep.
And if you can get that on all of your die faces, you activate your ultimate ability, which is just like ruin your
It's
opponent's
OP,
world.
but it's like it's really hard to do. So
Yeah, it's really hard to do.
Also in the game, you can upgrade your base board actions. So sometimes, like my main attack might be good, but I want to get it stronger. So if I can deploy one of those cards into play, now my little action is a little bit sweeter. So maybe I want a gun for that when I'm rolling
Yeah.
my dice and trying to get those Yahtzee combinations.
Yeah. So anyway, that is my number 5 and Naveen's number 7, Marvel Dice Throne.
Okay, my number 4. This is a new game that did come out this year. It was highly anticipated for me when I first heard about it. It is designed by John D. Clare and it's published by AEG. This is a game called Ready, Set, Bet.
We all knew this was going to be on your list. This is like Naveen's most talked about game this
I
year,
really
right?
like this game. Yeah. So this one is basically you're at the horse track. You're betting on different horses. Somebody is running the races. So there's a set of dice, two dice, and you're going to start rolling and calling out which horse is going to be moving. Horses are going to be represented by these die rolls, and there's physically horses that are going to be moving along the track. And essentially, you have a stack of chips, and you're trying to place out your bets as fast as possible. So it's called Ready, Set, Bet because you sometimes have imperfect information. Obviously, the horses are going to move based off of statistics and dice rolls, and you might see, oh, that 6 horse really got out fast. I'm going to bet on the 6 horse. But all of a sudden 6s don't roll, and then all of a sudden 2s and 3s and 4s are starting to roll, and other horses start to come on, and then you kind of get this FOMO because you see other people are putting out different bets, and you're just kind of like, oh my
Sometimes
gosh.
for no reason.
Yeah.
Like we played Ready Set Bet when we were filming the Fire and Ice Awards, and immediately, right when the race started, people were betting, and I was like, what is
You
going
have no
on?
information to
You have
go off
zero
of.
information.
Yeah.
And you're locking in your bets.
That's right.
Once you place your tokens, they're there.
And there are consequences to some of your bets because there are negatives. If you not only do you not get any money at the end of the race, but if the horse did not finish the way you kind of said, some of them may have negative points. So you have to actually give up money. So most points wins, which is most money at the end of 3 rounds. This game is very group dependent, I would say. And definitely if you have a good person who can call out the horses fast and roll those dice really fast and accurately and is really into it, that makes the game very, very entertaining. Every single time we've played it, the person running it has done a fantastic job. We have done it with the app before. We've heard it with the app. It's not quite the same, but it does get you going.
We've mentioned that in a video in the past, and I've seen comments where people were saying, we use the app and it's great.
Yeah,
so
perfect.
it really just depends on you.
Yeah, this one, I could see it being polarizing. A lot of times people don't like betting games and things like that.
Yeah,
For me,
that's fair.
I really enjoy it. I like the thrill of just kind of what's going on at the table. And I just, the fight for area, like the area space with your hands. And, it's really, really fun. Well, that is my number 4. That is Ready, Set, Bet.
All right, moving on to my number 4. This is a game that was also designed by Matthew Dunstan, but this time also with Brett J. Gilbert, and it's published by AEG. It was published this year, actually, and it is called The Guild of Merchant Explorers. So this is another game that Naveen has not played.
I have not tried it, no.
But I've played it at 2 and solo because I was playing it to prepare for a solo video. And it's a great game. In this game, you're basically trying to explore different maps. So everybody plays with the same map, but the game comes with several of them that all all have sort of different personalities to them. Over the course of the game, you're basically trying to establish, I think they're called villages. I don't quite remember the different terminology now. You're trying to reach different areas of the board by crossing through different types of terrain. So over the course of the round, you're going to flip over these terrain cards, and it's going to tell you how many of these hexes you're allowed to place your cubes on,
Okay.
and what type of terrain those hexes have to be a part of. And you're trying to do this so that you can claim treasure, you can claim different areas of the map that will help you score points in different ways. Sometimes you can connect to different trade routes across the water so that you can score the points of the trade routes. Each different type of element on the map scores in a different way. At some point in the round, you'll have the opportunity to gain your own investigation card. That's basically your own card that you can activate whenever that certain terrain tile comes up, if that makes sense. It's really hard to explain, but it's almost like customizing your own engine.
Okay.
So that by the end of the game, you'll have, I believe, 3 different cards that only you can use when the timing comes up.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. That's probably the best part of the game for me, the fact that you can customize what you get to do.
So do you
at certain
randomly
points in the
draw
game.
one of these cards?
I believe
or
you
is
draw
it-
2 and you get to
Okay.
keep 1.
Okay.
You definitely have a choice.
So there's a decision.
There's a decision that you're going to make that you might be making based off of your current
The
board
situation
state.
you're in.
Yeah, the situation that you're in, and
Okay.
kind of foreseeing how it can help you in the future.
Okay.
And there are also some common objectives that you're trying to reach to try to reach those objectives first to score the most amount of points. It plays very quickly. It plays great solo because it plays essentially the same way. Just you are required to complete each of the public objectives rather than
So you can lose to the game.
you can lose to the game.
Ah, okay,
Yes,
that's
it's actually
good.
quite hard solo,
Nice.
I think.
I think I
But-
prefer that on solo game, like the idea of it on a solo game. I don't play too much solo games,
Yeah.
but versus just like how high can you score?
yes.
You know what I mean? It's like no, you have to
Well,
do these things.
It's both.
Sure.
It's like how high can you score, but also if you do not complete each public objective, you
Totally.
auto lose.
Yep.
Which I thought was great
Yeah.
because besides that, the entire game plays the same way. There's some issues with it, like your cubes can kind of fly around the place if you're not careful with it.
Oh, okay.
But otherwise, the actual gameplay is, I think, super interesting. It's innovative. You know, every round, all the cubes that did not get finalized in a way get removed from your map. So you always having to build up again each round.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Yeah.
so things get torn down.
It's
and then you
almost
start
like
over.
if you play like roguelike games, it
Uh-huh.
almost kind of that's like a silly a silly way to describe it. But
Okay.
in a round, you're trying to just reach as far as you can because those lions will get removed at the end of the round. If that makes
Gotcha.
sense.
Okay, so you got to really go for it.
You have to really go for it. You have
Okay.
to really kind of know what you're doing, or else you might be building towards nothing.
Towards
if you
nothingness.
don't have a true purpose.
Ah, interesting.
Because you can see which terrain cards have not been drawn yet. So you can kind of plan ahead
Estimate.
that way.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
So I found that game to be super interesting. Really love it. I'm going to keep that in our collection, and I am super excited to see what more games Matthew Denson and Brett Gilbert release
Yeah.
because I'm becoming
A lot of the
big
games
fan
you
here.
like. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, that is my number 4, The Guild of Merchant Explorers.
Cool. All right, moving on. Our number 3, and I say
Mm-hmm.
our because it's both Monique and my number 3 for this year, came out earlier this year. It's designed by Fabienne Gradel as well as Johan Levitt. It's a 1-to-4 player game from Le Scorpion Masqué, and it is called Turing Machine. This is a pure deduction game
Yes.
where you're trying to crack a code.
Yes, you're trying to crack a 3-digit code to be exact.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that you go about doing that is using this really nifty analog computer of sorts, probably designed by Alan Turing or based off of Alan
Based off of it,
Turing's
yeah.
works. And you're basically doing educated trial and error. Each number in the 3-digit code is assigned to a specific shape, like circle, square, and triangle. And each round, you're going to think of your own 3-digit code, maybe.
Yep.
And then you're going to test that against these different parameters that are on the table. So every time you choose a scenario to play through, the scenario actually tells you which specific card parameters you're going to be playing with.
Right.
And these parameters are going to say things like, how many ones are in the code? And then the answers might be 0, 1, 2, or 3,
Yep.
right? Because you can only have max 3 digits.
Totally.
And so if during the round I put in my own code, say I put in like 115, and I put it into that paper and it gives me a red X, that means since there were 2 1s in my code,
There are not 2 1s in this code.
yes, there are not 2 1s in that code
Right.
because it said no, right?
That's right. Yeah. So even if you went and retested it, Monique's guess of the code was
Yeah.
115. She retested it 511. She would already
It'll still
know
say, yeah,
that
definitely not.
cannot be it because those are 2 1s in there, and it says there are not 2 1s in this code.
So now I will rethink what I want to test against that parameter, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
pivot and test a different parameter because each round I believe you can only test up to 3. So you're going to be going back and forth, getting your information and reanalyzing to give a different code. Because I believe each round you can also only use one code.
Right.
So that one code needs to make sense with the different parameters that you're testing.
So yeah, it's tough. It's because you're trying to figure out like which codes you want to, or which code is going to be the most bang for your buck
Yes.
when you're going to go and
Right.
test out these different parameters.
Yeah.
So it's like if I know there's no two ones in there, so maybe I want to get another code that's going to give me a little bit more information
Yeah.
with some other information. Some of the parameters on there might say like the circle number relative to the triangle number. So I'm like, okay, well, if I know that something is greater than 4,
Yeah.
then it's going to be this. Okay, so now I can kind of zero in,
Right.
and there's going to be a lot of like crossing off on like your little sheet until you
Yes.
can kind of arrive at the answer.
And it's really important for you to choose a 3-digit code that is the most bang for your buck, because at the end of the round, the winner is going to be the one who arrived at the true answer using the least amount of guesses
Yeah.
of testing.
Yeah,
So,
for us,
and-
for a competitive game,
Yeah.
this is not. We're not super competitive in this one. It's just
No.
you just want to have the fun of arriving at the answer. by
Yeah,
doing
and
divination. Yeah.
try to do it in the least amount.
Try.
I mean, with at least here, we usually do it within like one of each other, or we'll arrive there at the same time. It's usually a very close type game.
Yeah.
But the act of trying to arrive to that number is really fun. So that is our number 3, the super hot game at the moment. Hopefully, if it's not wildly available, it'll be available soon.
Yep.
And it's called Turing Machine.
All right, moving on. We are now on number 2. This is a game designed by one of my favorite designers of all time. This is from Martin Wallace. It's a 2 to 4 player game published by Cosmos, and it is called Anno 1800. This game actually came out, I believe, in 2020, but new to us this year. Essentially, what you're doing in this game is you are trying to build up this different port civilization by using different workers, trying to make those workers happy, and building out different buildings and industries to try to chain these basic cube conversions to try to score the most amount of points.
Oh my gosh.
That's what I'm saying.
It's based off of a video game.
It's based off a video
which
game, which
Clearly,
I've never
neither of us
played.
have played.
Never played.
So we
Yeah.
think it's like a Civ builder, right?
The
Like
video
your-
game,
The
for
video
sure,
game.
yeah.
You're building out your town. You have employees who come from different. It's almost like a caste system.
Almost different
right?
walks of life. Like you have
Yeah.
the farmers, you have the nobles, and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you're trying to build out industries onto your board
Yep.
by placing the workers on them that the industries require.
That produce those resources.
That produce
then.
those resources.
Yeah.
And you're basically trying to build out more and more of these industries, but there's a mechanism in there that requires you to borrow from players around you because there are only so many industries per type, and you're going to need some of these industries in order to build out the higher ones, if that makes sense. So you might need coffee or chocolate. I think chocolate was one.
Chocolate's one, yeah.
In order for you to build out something else, and maybe only Naveen has the chocolate right now, so I might need to borrow from him. So there's a lot of player interaction in an otherwise very dry Euro game.
Yes, it's
So that's the part that's interesting.
yeah, it's and we also found that the 2-player game would not be as dynamic as the 3-player experience because of that whole borrowing mechanism. It's interesting in this game. There are no actual resources. Basically, the way you acquire resources is by placing the appropriate workers in that particular building, and that represents I've made chocolate, which I need to now do something else. And so in this game, you really have to kind of plan out your town, like what industries are you willing to invest your time in to build up? Do you even need to build up this industry because your neighbor, meaning an opponent, has already built it up? So instead of you spending all this time and resources and actions to build that same exact industry on your turn, you can just say, I'll just borrow from you. Sure, you'll get a benefit, but now I get something based off of your infrastructure.
Right.
So that was a really,
really
really interesting part of the game for me. The end game is kind of strange in the sense that you have to. The game ends when a player rids themselves of their cards,
Yes.
but cards are kind of how you score points. So there's kind of this like standoff of like, well, Monique has 5 cards and she has 6 cards and I only have 4 cards.
Well,
Do I want to end it?
yeah.
But I want to kind of score more points. I don't really know where I stand right now. So
That is the kind of the strange part of the game for me, the timing of it, because
Sure.
every time I believe you add more people to your workforce,
You're forced to take-
take
yeah.
more cards. So it's this kind of like never ending, like, oh, I'm about to get rid of my cards, but now I have to gain more cards, and so the game is going to continue going on.
It's almost like, I think I'm satisfied with the points here. I think I'm better than where everybody else is. I'm going to try to not take more
End it.
cards and try to end it by
But you can't.
spending my cards. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the gameplay building out these industries is so that you can fulfill these cards, because that's truly how you score points.
Right.
You can be building out industries for literally no reason. And that
It
is
happens.
sort of a pitfall in the game that you can find yourself in,
Yep.
which is definitely part of the gameplay. But yeah, that is another sort of innovative, interesting design, right?
Yeah. I am very interested in playing the actual video game. I just don't know if I have the time to kind of dedicate to it. But
Yeah.
the person that we did play Anno 1800 with is the third player is a fan of the video game,
Yeah.
and she said that they did a very good job with kind of porting it into a board game. So that is my number 2. That is Anno 1800.
All right, moving on to my number 2. We're almost to the very end here. This is actually another game that Naveen has not
I
played.
have not played this one
And this
yet.
is also a game that we don't own. And it is designed by Xavier Georges, published by Quined Games, and it is called Carnegie. So this is a game that came out this year, and it's actually quite heavy. It's like a heavy strategy game based or themed around the life and works of Andrew Carnegie, who was an entrepreneur, mogul of sorts,
Big mogul,
in the United States. In this game, you're going to be doing things like building out your different departments, hiring employees, moving them around to the different departments, because those department buildings kind of dictates actions that you can do and how strong you can do them, depending on how many employees are in there. There's a map in the middle of the board that you're going to be trying to make connections with. And there's also a strong action following mechanism, similar to games like Race for the Galaxy or just any game that has like a following mechanism. This one has one too.
So meaning on another player's turn, you can
Yes.
position yourself so that you get to take actions?
Yes,
Okay.
maybe. Yeah,
Maybe,
you have
okay.
to set yourself up to be able to follow certain actions. And so that's actually a big part of the game, because you want to make sure that you're always set up at the right time so that you can maximize the number of actions you get during the game. So that's actually, it's good and bad, because it does make the game quite harder at higher player counts.
Oh, I
But
see.
because of you trying to manage that while also
Right.
trying to manage your board and all the things that you're trying to do, which makes me really interested in trying the solo version of the game, which I haven't done yet, because then you can really just kind of figure it all out, right? So I thought the gameplay was really, really interesting, and it's really right up my alley in terms of heavy strategy games, and definitely one of my favorite heavy strategy games to come out this year.
So you think this would be one that I would really enjoy?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think you should try it.
Yeah, it was on our anticipated list, on both of our anticipated
Yeah.
list game, I think for 2022.
Right.
And I just didn't have the chance to play it.
Yeah, one day, maybe for 2023.
Maybe. Yeah.
So anyway, that is my number 2 from 2022, Carnegie.
Okay, the number 1 game of 2022 for me.
That is not Ark Nova.
That is not Ark Nova.
Yes.
This one actually came out in 2013.
Oh,
It
wow.
is designed by Jeff Grossman as well as Volka Runke. It's a 1 to 4 player game from GMT Games. It is called Cuba Libre.
Yes,
Now,
that's
Cuba
right.
Libre is one of the first coin games out there. Coin meaning counterinsurgency. It's kind of shortened. And essentially what you're going to be doing is you're simulating the Cuban Revolution. So
Yeah, it's a war game.
it's a war
of
game,
sorts.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's got a unique kind of a way that actions are taken and a turn order is taken. Essentially, what you're going to be doing is taking on the roles of one of 4 different factions. You're either the current government in Cuba, you're the revolutionaries, or the casinos and the mob, or the students that are trying to rise up. And essentially what you're trying to do is meet your win condition. The game is played over a series of rounds or events in which players are going to be taking actions to try to manipulate the board in kind of an area control style game. It's a very clever mechanism in which you see who has the priority to take actions based off of this randomized deck of cards. And you're going to try to manipulate and make decisions on when to take actions based off of the events that are depicted on those cards. So sometimes you'll see something that's like, I really like that event, but I don't like the fact that I'm not going to be going on the next round because I don't have priority on that next one. So maybe I do want to take this event, and then on the next round when I'm not eligible to take actions, that's when I can kind of regroup and kind of see what the next kind of set of circumstances are going to be on the board. It's a really fascinating game.
Yeah, it's very fascinating.
We've played it several times, and what's really nice about this game is you can actually play it async. asynchronously.
It's almost better played async, right? Just
Yeah.
because of all the thinking, the downtime.
All the
Yeah.
information's out there. It's not like you have a deck of cards that you secretly hold on to. So it's not like you have to be kind of married to it at the table. It's kind of a long, lengthy game, but we play this game async all the time with friends all over
Yeah.
the world. And so you're able to take your turn, do a little video, send that video to everybody. They manipulate their boards, and then now they can like kind of marinate on it and take their turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is probably one of our most played games of the year.
Yeah.
Definitely. Mechanically, very sound. We hear that it is what Root is based off of, the Coin series. And this is one of the more popular games in the Coin line,
Yep.
right?
So that is the number one game for me from this year, even though it came out in 2013. That is Cuba Libre.
All right, now for my number one. We've made it. We're at the very end of the list here, and I think this might be the first time that an expansion made it to the very, very top of my list. And so if you don't already know what this expansion is, this is a game, an expansion that was designed by a whole team, and it was published by Leader Games this year, and it is the Root Marauder expansion. So this expansion introduced the hirelings, and that is why this expansion made it onto my list. Because Root, if you're not familiar with my history of it, Root is one of my favorite games of all time. It's in my top 10. We did a couple of gameplays on our channel for Root, and I put in a lot of effort to learn this game because the very first time I played Root to the base game, I did not like it at all.
Right.
And so for me to get from there to here was a lot of work. And just at 2 players before this expansion came out, it wasn't the most ideal game to play at 2.
There was something called the Clockwork expansion, which
Yeah.
allowed to automate different things. But sometimes it was good. It's still
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
It's something that we would still play with.
Yeah.
But sometimes you'd find things wouldn't make quite sense strategically. You're like, I don't think that bird would have acted that way based on it. But
Or-
you had to follow the systems that it said.
Yeah, or they'll find themselves in a robotic
loop
loop.
a little bit. Yeah.
And just like the upkeep of like, well, now what does the bird do again on their turn, the bot? So with the hirelings, it changed the game quite a bit because basically on the scoreboard, as soon as the first player to get to a certain
Threshold.
point on the scoreboard, it unlocks the hirelings. And now these hirelings are like a group of bandits that hop from player to player,
Right.
giving you their service. And the thing that's neat is you can use the hirelings to your strategy, but after a certain amount of time, the hireling is going to now rotate to your opponent's
It
hand,
gets transferred to them, for
which
sure.
is bad if you did not set yourself up for that in a
Yeah,
scenario.
because
Right?
the hireling is going to act in your benefit when it is on your side,
Yeah.
but then when you are forced to basically give it to your opponent, give them to your opponent, if you are in a position that you know that hireling is going to hurt you, you're in trouble because
Yes.
now not only have you lost control of them, but now they're going to be chipping away at you. So it gets very interesting, like tactically, like, okay,
It's really
I'm
cool.
going to tuck these hirelings away on my last turn because I know I'm not having this anymore.
Yeah.
So I need them to be way the heck over there.
Yeah.
So they're not going to affect me when it is in your possession.
And all of the hirelings operate differently depending on which faction hireling you're choosing to play with. So I thought that was such a game changer for the 2-player only game, which is the player count that we have the most access to. Because otherwise, Root was a game that I would typically only want to play at 3 or 4.
4 players, yeah.
And now we can play it with a lot of strategic depth at 2. So this expansion also came with 2 new factions. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of both. It was more the game changer hirelings
Yeah, I
that,
think
that
so.
really changed up the game for me. That is my number 1. It is an expansion this time, and it is the Root Marauders expansion. And that about wraps it up for our list.
Yeah.
Now, as promised, we do have some superlatives as
do.
well as our Patreon community. They provided their insights as to what their favorite new to them games were for 2022, and we have the top 3.
Yep.
But first, some superlatives. All right, favorite party game, go.
Green team wins. Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I was awful at that,
Yeah.
but that's fair.
You just want to be with the masses. You
Yeah.
just want to kind of guess. Maybe you're not answering truthfully, but you just want to answer as much as everybody else is answering.
That is a 2022 game. My pick is also a game that was released this year, and it's called Fun Facts.
Oh, fun facts. Okay.
Yes, that is a fantastic one. We don't own it yet. I want that game because it's such a good one to break out in a group of people who you kind of want to get to know a little bit better, right?
Okay, cool.
Favorite card game?
The game.
Yes.
The game
too.
titled The Game. I really enjoy that one. It's from Pandasaurus Games,
Yeah.
where you're trying to basically play out all the cards in the deck before the game beats you.
That's it in a nutshell.
Very nutshell.
That is my pick as well.
Mm-hmm.
Favorite older game, or maybe the oldest game that you played this year that you liked?
The Princes of Florence.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
that came out in 2000. We played that at our local convention. That is a fantastic game. There's kind of an auction element to it. You're trying to build up your city in Florence. And
Yeah.
you're trying to score the most amount of points.
That was a good game. And I think it's being republished. It's being remade.
Re-implemented.
Re-implemented.
Yes.
Yeah. So that Princes of Florence for
Princes
you?
of Florence, yeah.
For me, it's a card game that was taught to me by Kellen from the Board Game Barrage podcast at Dice Tower West, and it's called Innovation. This is a game that I really want to play more of that I actually forgot about until now. I don't remember what year it came out, but it is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's chaotic. It's pure chaos.
I've heard
but
good
it's
things
fun.
about it. I heard it's best at 2.
I think so. It's
From what I
super
understand.
chaotic. And finally, biggest blunder.
Biggest blunder.
We never talk about this.
Biggest
on the
games that
channel.
were like, oof. Okay,
Yeah.
there was 2 of them for me.
Oh, okay.
Sleuth.
Oh, come on.
We played it at a convention. There's TMI
like
in
that
that game. Way too much information to try to deduce on the fly. So Sleuth for me was definitely a blunder.
For the record, I really like that game. I like deduction games. You just have to take really good notes.
Bad. Terrible at taking notes.
What was your second one?
Second one would be Firenze.
Ah, yes.
This is a game I wanted to play for many, many years. I don't know what happened there. That game, it can be pretty mean. And in a 4-player situation where you're just a sitting duck waiting for your resources to survive before
Yeah.
it gets back to you, that is just not good. Not good at all for me.
That's actually one of the ones that were blunder for me
Blunder
as
for
well.
you, yeah.
I didn't remember how mean it was, but it can be quite mean. It's like you're building up your buildings just for somebody to say, nope, destroy them all.
I could see it possibly working in a 2-player game because it's
Yeah,
like, okay,
okay.
I go, then you go, and I only have to survive your turn. But in a 4-player game where it's like,
Mean.
I go, survive, and then that third player is like, nope, we're going to wipe your stuff out.
Yes.
It just was not fun.
That is mean, the board
A
game.
fun experience still playing it, though.
Yeah,
I did
yeah,
have
yeah.
fun playing it, but
With the
game
Brothers
itself,
Murph.
yes. But the game itself, not so fun.
And finally, the top 3 favorite games of the year from our Patreon community. They all commented and gave us all of their picks, and we narrowed it down to the ones that got the most votes.
Okay.
And okay, there is a 6-way tie for number 3.
Okay.
So I'm just going to name all 6 games.
boom, 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 boom.
I'm going to read them out loud,
Okay,
actually.
go ahead.
Dune Imperium, Endless Winter, Flamecraft, Turing Machine, Weather Machine, and Wonderland's War.
Okay, yeah.
So,
Wonderland's War is one that we have not played yet. We've heard good things about it. We've heard it's very long and also long to set up.
yes.
So it scares me a little bit, but I am interested in that game.
Number 2 was Carnegie.
Carnegie, yeah.
And number 1, the number 1 game on the Patreon communities list is Ark Nova.
Ark Nova, perfect.
So it's like we share common interests
I
or
know.
something.
Makes sense,
the
yeah.
community.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was everything. That is basically our year-end review for 2022. If you have your own top 10 list of games that you played that were new to you this year, feel free to leave us a comment down below with the list, because as usual, we always love hearing your recommendations.
Yeah, those lists are great for anybody else who's kind of newer to the hobby that might see the list
Yeah.
and they are interested in seeing different games. So it's very helpful if you do post those lists, because then it kind of exposes other people to more games. So
Yeah.
it's very helpful.
But anyway, that is all for now. Thank you all so much for your support throughout the years, and especially throughout this year. We hope you all have a wonderful and safe new year, and we will see you in 2023.
Yep.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.